Hi everyone, and welcome to this video. In this video, I'm attempting the Draw This Again challenge, and I'm looking back at my first ever fantasy art featuring an ice dragon. And I worked on this back in 2016, and I really want to attempt it again, now that it's been 5 years. Hopefully I've made some improvements. I have really fond memories of the time I worked on this ice dragon. At that time, 5 years ago, it was the moment I realised how much I love working on fantasy art. Especially dragons. I think it connects with the reason I love drawing in the first place. It all stems from my passion for video games and different characters and monsters. I just find so much inspiration from that. As you can see, I began by sketching the layout of this drawing with a graphite pencil, and the ice dragon I drew back then, well, I only worked on the head and the neck, having them overlap the panel to give a bit of a 3D effect. But back then I didn't add the dragon's body, or even the wings, and I remember wanting to, but I just didn't have enough confidence in my drawing ability. And back then I also tended to rush through my drawings to get them uploaded on YouTube as soon as I could, which was good in a way because it meant that I was uploading a lot more content. But it also meant that I wasn't pushing myself to develop my drawing ability. Looking back on it now, there have been times where it feels like my ability kind of stagnated because I wasn't trying ideas that I felt were outside my comfort zone. And at this point now, I just don't want to feel that way about my work, and that's why I thought this could be a good project to retry this drawing and challenge myself to draw more of the dragon's anatomy, also thinking about the world in which this dragon lives in and what the story could be. A big part of why I always loved trying fantasy art ideas is because I ended up enjoying reading the comments, seeing if the monster that I'd drawn had captured people's imagination, and often people would write their own story to go along with the drawing, and that felt so rewarding for the drawing to have that kind of impact. Once I'd completed the sketch, I chose to try a new pen for the outlining. I often use black Copic Multiliners for projects like this, but I decided to try a cool grey Copic Multiliner instead. I was so interested to see what kind of effect this would have on the overall drawing at the end. I had a feeling that it would be quite effective because when I've added black outlines to some of my drawings in the past, well, depending on how much ink I added, it can sometimes flatten the image completely. So I thought a grey pen would be worth a try. And I also liked the idea of being able to add some black outlines later on in the process. As you can see, for this dragon I went with a similar design for its head, making changes in some areas. And then for its neck and the rest of its body, I realised that it would make sense for its scales to be varying sizes, especially around joints where there's going to be lots of movement, so I made the scales much smaller in those areas. And I'm imagining that this dragon is standing in a cave, with the light from the sun shining in, and it's standing on lots of crushed up blocks of ice. Maybe that's its nest. And the dragon is being visited by the red-caped character that I've loved adding to my drawings over the past few years. With the outlines completed, it was time for me to start adding the colouring, and I wanted to use similar supplies to my drawing from 5 years ago. So I was using Copic markers, And for the dragon's head, I wanted to use mostly pastel tones, colours like frost blue, ice blue, pale blue-grey, and every now and then I changed it up and added a colour called cotton pearl to some of the scales, just adding an interesting variation to the dragon. Cotton pearl seemed to really complement the blue tones. Further down the dragon's body, I started adding some darker tones into the mix, with Prussian blue, phthalo blue, and yellowish skin pink for more of that varied colouring on the scales. And I also added highlighting with a white GellyRoll pen. One thing that I learnt from my drawings from 5 years ago is that I sometimes added too many highlights. I really enjoy adding them. And they can be so effective for making a drawing stand out, but it's definitely possible to go too far with them. To add a little bit more detail to the dragon's wings, I used a rose carmine Faber-Castell Polychromos pencil, and then it was time for me to start working on the environment around the dragon, and I wanted this to have a similar colour scheme, using mostly frost blue, ice blue, phthalo blue, and pale blue-grey for the ice and the snow. And then I used peach and lipstick natural for the cliffs that the character is standing on, and I used a crimson marker for the character's cape. For the background, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted the sun to be shining into the dragon's cave, so I coloured the sky with a marker called Yellowish Shade, and the first layer of the cave I used a marker called Pale Heath, which is nice and warm, and then I started using the same blue colours again, making the layers of the cave get cooler and darker as they get closer to the foreground. This is the point where I decided to start adding some black outlines to a few areas on the dragon, adding outlines under some of the scales, helping to make a few details closer to the foreground stand out. And this was the final stage of the drawing, and I decided to use a white Posca pen for some larger highlights in a few areas. And then I used the white GellyRoll pen and a white Faber-Castell pencil to add the rays of light from the sun. I'm so glad I tried this drawing. Being able to compare the two versions of this ice dragon is really interesting, and hopefully I've made some improvements. I feel like I've made some good improvements, drawing more of the dragon's body and thinking about the world in which it lives in, and the different storytelling elements. And I'm also still really fond of the first one because of the nostalgia. Working on that drawing was the beginning of my love for fantasy art, so I'll always be grateful for that. So be sure to let me know what you think of this, and also feel free to let me know what you think the story of this dragon is. I would love to read that. And as always, I would love to hear your suggestions for future art videos I could try. Your suggestions are so helpful. If you want to see more videos like this, then feel free to subscribe to this channel, and any likes or shares on this video are hugely appreciated. If you want to follow and support my art progress, then be sure to check out the links in the description for my Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and Patreon. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for the support. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you're all doing okay, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you all soon.